first of all, welcome. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And I guess the first place to start is your relationship and your collaboration, because I know it goes back quite a long way, doesn't
42
it?
years.
Okay, so how did you first get together and start working together?
I had a manager at the time, which was the same as Toyah's. This is in the 70s, it has to be said. And he said, I'm managing this girl who's going to be huge. You should come along and meet her. So he put us together.
I went along. It was it Richmond Road in Putney?
It was, yeah.
To this flat above a piano shop, and we met. We instantly got on. And the thing about Simon, not only is he very talented, he's actually a really decent human being. And in the music business, that can be quite an unusual experience. So we became friends. We wrote our first song together. Was
Sky Lullaby. It was
truly
called.
appalling.
It was rubbish. Yeah.
But then time took us apart from each other,
for a bit, yeah.
And we got together again for the Changeling when we needed a keyboard player on the Changeling, which was produced by Steve Lillywhite in '82. And Simon walked in again, and we've never been apart since, because you were involved with Love Is the Law.
Yeah.
And we've just been writing together solidly for about 35 years.
And it's always dead easy. Just happens instantly.
It's
always just fun. It's just, the whole thing is kind of vaguely funny. We just walk in and just sit down and do something.
It's like a psychic connection, and it always has been. Simon can just hit D on the keyboard and I'm singing away, and then we've got the song. Sometimes it comes in 2 minutes. Sometimes we allow it to take 6 months.
And then we chip away at it.
Or how many years was telepathic? 5
love
years?
was quite a long time, actually, yeah. But we were both fairly busy doing other things, it has to be said. But it was worth it. We just trust each other is the bottom line, I think.
And Simon, are you a multi-instrumentalist? I mean,
yeah, I play keyboards, guitars, cello. And a bit of drums, so I'm not really a drummer. But with modern technology, you can get away with playing a bar and make it sound like you can play drums. So it's quite okay. Anything that's plucked, I can basically make a noise with.
And one of the things I think my audience would be very interested in is you worked with Trevor Horn, didn't you?
I did. I was very fortunate. I met Trevor Horn when I was 18, I think, in a keyboard store called Rod Argent's in Denmark Street. And he just split up with Jeff Downes and the Buggles. And he said, what keyboards do you use? And I explained. And he said, have you got any songs? So I played him my little demo tape. And his wife, at the time, Jill Sinclair, who's sadly no longer with us, rang up and said, yeah, we think you've got something to say and we'd like you to join the Buggles briefly, which I did for the second album. And they gave me a publishing deal with Perfect Songs, and it just turned my life upside down, basically, in an instant.
Because you ended up co-writing Slave to the Rhythm, didn't you? Which obviously became that crazy album.
Yeah, that's right. It was originally, Bruce Willie and I wrote the original song, which was, because Trevor rang me up and said, we need a follow-up for Frankie Goes to Hollywood to Relax. And so we wrote that, and Holly came down and said he wanted to change the words, but we didn't fancy it at the time. And so Bruce and I started to record it, and then after that, it ended up, Trevor rang up and said, I want Grace to do it. And, you know, Grace Jones' Slave to the Rhythm seemed to fit as a concept.
Getting on to the album then, I read somewhere that the title, you know, obviously it's got the King Crimson reference, but was that your idea?
It was. I kind of said it all as a joke, really, but I just thought it'd be very funny, and Robert thought so too. So you know.
Well, it just massages his ego, doesn't it?
No, it's good, but it seems highly appropriate, really. She is the queen, after all.
I have nothing to say about it, really, the title. It doesn't bother me. That I'm an incredibly independent female, and I'm incredibly feminist. So it took a bit of kind of wedging the door open to get that one through. But, you know, it's fine. It's fine.
And of course, this album came out in 2008 originally.
The original format of the album. We've since remastered, added 5 or 7 new songs.
Exactly, but at the time when you originally kind of wrote those songs before this new version, you know, what was the inspiration for the songs? What was kind of going on in your life? How did the album come about? Because it'd been a while since you'd actually.
No, it hadn't been a while. I have a band called The Humans in America with Bill Rieflin from REM. So I'd already started We Are the Humans and Sugar Rush with him. And that's experimental music. But Simon and I are always drawn to each other because we just have this kind of rock style. And we live so close to each other, it became ridiculous that we weren't writing all the time. We're literally 30 miles apart. So it started with a song called Latex Messiah. And that came really quickly. And at that period, I was touring a show called Vampires Rock, which was about classic rock, and me having to wear a lot of PVC and have vampire teeth. So it was kind of ingrained that we should be using the kind of cultural reference of these kind of rock backgrounds that we both have. And it came so easily, and I can remember taking Latex Messiah back home, and Robert heard it, and he said that's the best song I have ever heard. And he became so passionate about the whole project. Yeah. But after that, the rest of the songs kind of happened really quickly. We had a lot of fun over one summer, and they just kind of bang, 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 bang.
Yeah. And there's quite a lot of variety, though. It's not all rock, is there? Because you've got some acoustic ballads like Heal Ourselves, etc. I mean, was it important to have a bit of variety in terms of the sound?
I thought. I mean, I thought if you're going to do an album, then try and make it into a shape, rather than just a random collection of songs. So we did think about the way the tempos went and what led into the next, and it became quite a story lyrically from your point of view, and it told about lots of aspects of your life, which made some sort of sense. So it gave it a shape.
What we do is we sit in a room and we see what happens, and the room never lets us down. So usually you go to the piano or to the guitar and I say, keep that, move on to this, and we kind of cut and paste biologically, organically within the room. And then I take the track away, do the first draft of the lyric, come back, sing it to Simon, and then we kind of chip away at it. But that whole thing about the light and shade within the style of the songs, once you've done a rock song, you don't really want to backtrack and do another rock song. You want to push forward and try moving it into a different genre. So that's how those different elements and those kind of cultural influences keep coming back into the music.
The albums we grew up listening to, there were many more journeys originally, and the creativity of the 70s artists was just fantastic, and you'd sit and listen to a whole album as opposed to just listening to half a stream for 12 seconds on an iPhone. It was a very different world, and I used to love lying on the floor and just listening to these little journeys and taking the songs, and so it was naturally in us to sort of want to do that.
The 70s was just amazing. Lyrically, I'm always trying to invert things as well. Heal Ourselves came at a time when there was so much kind of hatred. With all the stories, we're always fed bad news the whole time. No one ever prints good news. It doesn't make money, it doesn't terrify people. And then Bad Man came out of the extraordinary amount of men I know who are demonised by divorce. And I thought, well, these aren't bad men, and they're being crippled through the divorce laws. And when we wrote Bad Man, both Simon and I agreed that we wanted to write something that gave the man the pedestal back. So that was actually, a lot of the time when we're writing these things, we're both in tears because we're quite passionate about the subject matter. But I'm always trying to just invert the lyric and tip it.
And how much do you think about commerciality and whether you might have a hit or radio or play a certain song? I mean, is that in your mind at all when you're... Commerciality,
I go to sleep with commerciality in my mind. But what does a hit mean? Wow. I think as long as you're creative, that's all that matters.
I mean, having Trevor Horn taught me a lot, and he was all about focus and getting things as clean and clear as possible. So commerciality does. I like the idea that people would like it. I mean, you write because you want to write and stuff comes out, but once it's out, then I do subscribe to schools trying to make it as focused and as accessible as possible. And if that's commerciality, I guess that's commerciality.
And also, it's my energy as well, isn't it? I'm not a ballad singer. I'm never ever going to be like Mariah Carey or Celine Dion. What I do is high energy rock, and I think the commerciality sits very well within the persona of Toyah. And that's what we end up with. And we've never really tried to subdue that. There's no point trying to make me super mature.
The clothes have to fit the artist, you know.
And when the album, I mean, I was talking to Ben earlier, when the album, when you first kind of released it, I mean, did it get a full kind of release? I mean, did it struggle to find an audience?
What do you mean? I play to sell out audiences. My audience are live audience. I do 4 shows a week right through the year. We had pop-up record shops at every venue. So I've been performing these songs since 2007. My audience has lapped them up. But my audience is like a club. It's an exclusive club. I'm not mainstream. I'm not accepted mainstream. I manage myself. I don't have a mainstream manager. I don't have a mainstream promoter. I do absolutely everything. And I do non-stop sell-out shows. I actually think the ethos of my life is the perfection of punk, because I've done it all on my own. It's backbreaking, and the fans have just keep coming. I mean, last week I did Halifax. I didn't realise I was doing a student union venue. I mean, people were begging to get in. So just queues around the block. So these are the people that made the album possible. This is why we got together and we were writing, is the audiences are there and they're big and they're coming all the time. I'm just dealing with non-stop gig bookings. I would just love someone to scoop us up and say, right, Toyah, you can just get on and sing the songs. I'll do the business for you. So you ask, what was the audience in 2007? Exactly the same audience as today. The people that are just queuing outside the venue to get in.
I think what's different though is the moment, because 10 years ago, to be an older artist was slightly, you still couldn't really get arrested at radio, but now it's a completely different story, and I think Toyah as an independent woman really hits the zeitgeist now. As there's people who are 60 and 50 or whatever who are still young and thinking, hang on a minute, I don't want to be old, and they're still into the same music, and that's just come out. It's in everything. It's in the culture now. So this is, timing wise, I think it's a better time to be listened to, and you can get ready. There's loads of bands. I know you've interviewed a few of them stuff, haven't you? Yeah. There's a moment, and it's very interesting.
I think age is a concept. Okay, physically, yeah, we get older, but this whole concept of everything ebbing away, it's just not real to us. And I don't know, I just feel just as connected now as I did 40 years ago. There's so much to do. And when I'm not doing this with Simon, I'm co-producing movies. I have to write things for books all the time. It's not slowing down at all. And I think the whole message within this album is you are still you. You don't just fade away. I think that whole concept of fading away just isn't real anymore.
Can you explain a little bit about the approach then to this new edition? You've got these 2 CDs and there's some new tracks on there, and I believe every track on the album you've gone back to and maybe done some work on it. Yeah,
I mean, essentially when we did the original album, I programmed all the drums. But so we've gone and got real drums on this, and it's made a huge difference. Clive Edwards from UFO, who used to be in UFO, has played the drums, and it's just given the whole thing an energy that it really needed that we didn't have the first time round. And a lot of the performances are still the same, but we've added some keyboards and stuff now that weren't there, just to widen things out a bit. But it's just, what was quite amazing to me is when you put the real drums on and you had this real rhythm section going, all those performances just came up even more energetically than they did in the originals. And the new songs are a collection of various things we've done in the last couple of years, including Hurricane, a track we really love, is brand new this year. It all sounds fresh to me, and which because over in the intervening years I used to listen to it and think this album is still alive, so we're just thrilled that we're getting an opportunity to put it out now.
And things like Our Hearts Still Beat. I was in a movie called Extremis, and they needed an outro song, and I said, I can do it. I do it with Simon, and we've both recently lost our parents. Well, you've got your mum still, haven't you?
Yeah, she's still around, yeah.
But the whole premise of Extremis is losing a child. So we went into the studio. How many weeks did we spend crying?
It was pretty moving, actually.
I mean, we could not get a vocal down because we sang it together. We were just sobbing for about 4 weeks.
Not because it was that bad, you understand?
No, it was just so raw, so raw. And then Who Let the Beast Out? I was involved with a musical in London at the Scoop Theatre, based on Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, and they used 13 of our songs, and they needed an extra song within a week's notice. So Who Let the Beast Out was for that musical. And so everything has kind of come about through request.
Dance in the Hurricane, I mean, you mentioned that, Simon, that leads the new version of the album. Yeah. And I was very interested in that track because, you know, lyrically, Toyah, you kind of pay tribute really to your kind of parents and
Another song that took a month to record because we're just crying all the way through it. In fact, Simon kept very verse vocal when I burst into tears.
I did actually. There were a couple of moments.
I held your little soul. I just couldn't do it without falling on the floor. My relationship with my parents was not normal. My mother was particularly brutal, but I wanted to pay respect to her, and that whole thing of her calling from the ether, saying it's all going to be okay, was really important to me. But boy, it was hard, wasn't it?
Yeah. But these are very real things. Around this age, you start losing your folks, and it's something your child self, you think is never going to happen. But it happens, and it's kind of moving, and even though it's obvious, it's very, very moving. And
they're still with you.
Yeah, they are.
They're
That's
very
the peculiar
much with
thing. There's very much, you hear them, you do hear their voices, and it's like, oh, I must give Dad a ring, you know, and you think, oh, you can't actually.
And lyrically, the other thing was it celebrates this idea of being an individual, be the person you want to be, don't let someone else write your rules, etc.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting because I have 2 teenage daughters, and what you find is I don't get that same sense of people wanting to be individuals anymore. People want to be the same. They want to look the same half the time.
We're in a world of impersonators. It's terrifying. Individuality is so important. If we don't have individuality, we don't have culture to a certain extent. And I think one of the most important messages in the album, and with the song Sensational, is that you have a right to be individual. You are beautiful, no matter what age, what body shape, whether you are an ideal of beauty or you're an ideal of what the world calls ugly, you're still absolutely effing sensational. And the whole idea of this album is we are unique, we're miraculous. We're floating on a rock in the middle of the universe we don't know. We are utterly miraculous. And that individuality is so important in the album, of giving voice to those who feel they're voiceless and invisible.
And how hard was it to work out a new running order? Because obviously you've got these new songs, and you know, our hearts still beat. It was an obvious one to end with, I guess. But I mean, it must have been tricky slotting everything.
It was actually, if once it was decided Hurricane should be the kind of the thing that opens the whole, you know, the first act in the Court of the Crimson Queen, you know, then it sort of made sense. Keep the energy up, and then, but don't put all the slow ones at the end, was the kind of what I had in my head. So I tried to just take them away. It's
also difficult because we've got a song called Legacy, which we both really, really love, and it's so on Toyah. And we wanted to place it further forward, and we thought, no, we can't do it.
It's definitely an ending of a side.
Just a phenomenal song. So we had a few problems like that.
Are you quite excited to be releasing it on vinyl, Toyah?
Yeah, very excited. I love the fact that we're doing vinyl. It's what I fell in love with music over as a child. But also the whole imagery. We've been working on really specific imagery that's tied together right through the whole of the project. So we're excited that people are going to get a piece of vinyl that is spectacularly good looking. So that's very exciting. Vinyl, I think, it sounds, it's deeper, it's richer, it's got so much more to it. And knowing then that the double CD's coming, and that's going to be quite a fantasy journey. It's I think we've got a 23-page booklet in it. So passionately involved with that. We're very happy.
That's great.
And the artwork's been updated, I believe, hasn't it?
More than updated,
Okay.
it's completely new. We shot the video yesterday.
Yeah,
and
good.
It's surprisingly beautiful, you know, coming from two old farts. It's very...
Makeup took a long time though.
I think people are going to be pleasantly surprised.
And will this be the last Toyah album? Because there's a lot of conversation about, you know, do albums even have a place in the world? I mean, Sheryl Crow came out recently and said she's probably not going to bother making another album because she can't find people that have got the attention span to sit and listen to the whole album.
Such an intelligent comment, because she's right. We've tried taking on board younger people, and our attention span is really good, and it's challenging. It's very challenging. I think it's cruel to give up on, you know, the thought that people no longer have that.
Well, I think these things are cyclical. You know, I think we are dealing with a generation of, you know, you mentioned your teenagers. They're just in a different. They're engorged with stuff, so they've stopped thinking, and that there will be a reaction to that. There'll be some sort of new punk. Something will happen to them, and some of them will wake up and go, "I'm not having this anymore. I want to do something," and they'll start making noise or renouncing technology. So, I'm sure it'll come back. I do think these things do.
You ask if this is the last Toyah album. I think you and I will keep writing.
I'm sure.
forever.
Yeah.
We do an album because we want to do an album,
Yeah, right.
not because it's financially rewarding. It's an act of communicating with the world, and, you know, something we feel driven to do. Will it be the last album? That I don't know. I think that's a really, really poignant question. Thanks to technology, there's an awful lot of other stuff to do these days. So our album's going to become something quaint and antiquated. Let's see.
Did you consider doing a new album? Because obviously you had 4 tracks. You were probably halfway to creating a whole new record. Did you consider doing that at any point instead of, you know, kind of making the other one a bit better?
What happened, the turning point was, on my birthday last year, I was 60, on May the 18th, and the fans put a track called Telepathic Lover at #1 in the Amazon download chart. And we were contacted and told that could have no radio play without an album deal. We now have the album deal, and we're giving it back to the fans, and we're very happy to do that. We're already itching to write the next album.
Yeah, absolutely. But because these songs never got the exposure I felt they should have had those years ago to actually have a chance to get them out there, they still stand so alive to me that it made sense to do that and add the bits that we got since, rather than, because it can take quite a long time to make a record. So, you know, by the time you've got 12 or 10 good new songs,
I think it also takes a long time when you're virtually the head of PRS as well.
Well, there are distractions.
There's huge distractions.
Yeah. What are your plans for the next year in terms of, you've got the new record coming out, as you were saying earlier, you're always touring. I mean, are you doing anything special?
Yeah, I've got 2 tours this year. Okay. So the first tour kicks off in Scotland in April, and all the gig dates are on toyahwillcox.com. I think we have almost 130 dates in this year, so it's very busy. And then we round it off with the autumn dates at the end of October, and then I think there might be quite a big announcement for December, but that's jumping the gun a bit.
I'm fascinated by your career because you've always had 2 things on the go. You've had the acting and the music. I mean, how has that worked for you? It seems to have worked very well, always having something else to do. I mean, have you enjoyed the... Yeah,
I have 4 movies about to be green-lit, and if they all happen together, I'm up shit creek. I'm also co-producing a movie about the albino community in Africa, so that's taking up quite a lot of time in connecting things together. It's going to be an interesting year.
Where does all this energy come from? Because you always seem to be involved in so many things. I mean, what stops you putting your feet up and just...
I'm not interested in putting my feet up. I love my work. I've always loved my work, and I've been very much married to the work. I feel passionate as a woman, that kind of saying, hello, I'm still here, hello, I'm still here. You know, it's unbelievable working as a woman in this industry. it's still happily sexist, monogamous, misogynist. I mean, it's still going on. But it's what I do. It's what I've always intended to do, and I am a performer, and I love doing it. And if I put my foot up, I'd see that as not only as failure, but as rejection as well. It's just not what I'm going to do.
It's interesting you were saying about the industry, because the film industry and the music industry and TV and all the rest of it, have they been any different in terms of how you're treated as a woman?
Hugely different, hugely different. I can give you 2 examples, and they're both extreme. I was sent by my first agent, who was slightly dodgy, male agent, to audition for Russ Meyer's Vixens 2. I was 18 years old and had no idea that it was a soft porn movie. And I turned up for the meeting on Cheney Street in Chelsea and wondered why I was being asked to take my top off. And I walked out of that one. So that was the beginning of my career. And I stuck by those principles. I didn't sleep with directors, I didn't sleep on the casting couch. I just thought, no, this is wrong. And within 2 years, I was working with Katharine Hepburn, with a Hollywood icon who loved me as a woman, and I loved her as a woman. And no one had to do anything that we didn't want to do. Then after that, I ended up in Quadrophenia. And let's just jump forward 40 years to today, where actually I'm embraced by an industry that sees me as someone of quality, someone of talent, and understands that I have a burning will to make films I love and to make music I love. I mean, that is the difference 40 years makes. But it also really helps being older today. I actually think it's beneficial, because no one treats you the way that 18-year-old girl was treated 40 years ago in auditions.
And I read a comment, where you said you had this desire for fame when you were young. You wanted to be famous. What advice would you give, young people, young women today? Because that isn't looked upon as a positive thing anymore, is it? Just wanting fame for fame's sake.
Fame's about celebrity now. I would say to young people, be true to yourself, because we all have something utterly unique within ourselves. Don't be an imitator or an impersonator. Find your uniqueness. And also, I think, live a creative life and realise when you're picking that phone up and pouting at it and tweeting it, you're an imitator. There's something, we have to create a culture of the future, and that will only be done by knowing who you are as an individual. Would you agree?
I think I would, actually. I mean, it's all about having something to say, and not everybody has something to say. A lot of people are quite happy to just go along with the ebb and flow of life. But there's the sort of false celebrity has created this state which is vacuous and is meaningless, and that's why so many people are sort of freaking out online, because they don't really have anything to say. And as you've just said, you see them on the tubes, people pouting, I'm on a tube, and you think, God, anyway, with the eyebrows and all that stuff. Anyway, don't get me started about that. But it's real talent. You have to have something to say. And
I think when you look
you
look at the rise of bands like 1975.
Yeah.
I mean, what they're doing is phenomenal. Their videos are staggering. And then you go back to the grunge period of the 90s, no one would dream of being vacuous. So I think, the talent and the brilliance is out there, and you just have to search for it. And if you kind of look at it through celebrity, it's quite hard to find, but there is astonishing things going out there. The talent is there, and it's not necessarily about commercialism.
What do you think of the way the music industry is now? Because on the face of it, there's more opportunity. It's easier to sort of publish your own.
There's huge opportunity, yeah.
But on the other hand, it's harder to make a career selling albums.
Well, it is, yeah.
I mean, is that a bit of a depressing state?
No, I mean, this is what we've been doing for decades.
Yeah, I think it's still evolving. There will be everyone's finding their way, because the music industry is traditionally very slow to change. I mean, when streaming started and they still tried to force you to buy a CD, if everyone had just got with it, everyone would have still been paying £4 or £5 for a CD, and it would have all been economically possible. So it's had to go through that whole period of change, and streaming is just starting to pay a bit. It's coming up. It's not all the way there, but it's certainly up. And again, it just comes down to boredom. I think it will be possible to make albums because people will go back to wanting to be part of something, to listen to a journey rather than just snippets. Hamburgers get boring after a while. It's a quick fix, and as I said earlier, it's a cyclical thing. So I do think there's great hope for the music business. It just has to adapt, and it's slowly starting to get it together. But it has to realise the models have got to be different. You have to include the artists more. The artists just can't be employees which is what they were before. And it's a different thing. And people are more clued up these days. They understand what they're doing. So they don't want to give 90% of their royalties away. They'd like to keep a bit more, please, and it's fair enough. So everybody's got to find a new way of doing it. It's coming. There's some great independence.
And it's immense fun.
It is, yeah. It can be.
I think you kind of have to stay on top of the business side. I was saying to Simon driving here that I played Halifax the other day, which was a blinding gig. Drove home, worked in the office till 7 in the morning, then drove to Heathrow. It takes dedication and focus, and as well as making the albums and selling the albums, you book the shows, you get the musicians to the shows, you feed the musicians, you get them hotels. It's an industry, and it's not surface at all. There's incredible depth to this industry, and I have never learnt so much as working with the really big stars, from Katharine Hepburn to Laurence Olivier to Roger Daltrey. You see how hard they work, and that's the level you don't see. So your social media is up there, and then as you go lower down, there's this incredible industry of dedication. And it's fun. It's absolutely precious and brilliant. And that's kind of why we do it.
What ambitions do you have left, Toyah? I saw online that you're learning piano at the moment.
Oh, I love it. I love it. In my rucksack down there is my music theory books.
Very good.
Tell me why you started doing that then.
I think I have to start off by saying that not only am I severely dyslexic, but I'm dyspraxic, which means I've never been able to, as a musician, separate my hands or even get a message to one hand has been quite remarkably difficult. So I started my piano lessons this year because the one thing I left school with 45 years ago was music theory, because I have an astonishing memory. I'm almost savant with my memory. I can tell you what I wore on this day 10 years ago. I have that kind of memory. But controlling everything is very difficult, and I am now able to play piano, read the music, split my hands, and it almost means more to me than all the hit singles because every day I sit down at the piano and play, and that for me is my greatest achievement to date. I know it sounds really stupid, but I wasn't allowed to have piano lessons as a child, and I believe that everyone in school should have piano lessons because there's just something about the way you place your thoughts that helps you deal with the everyday.
And just finally, to finish off, you've got this great back catalogue of music. Do you plan to sort of go back and reissue old albums, create box sets, do anything like that?
Yeah, there's box sets planned for this year. I own half the catalogue now, and Simon and I own our stuff, so that makes it possible. I think for the early stuff, I haven't mentioned this to you, but I think we're going to have to go into the studio and re-record the first 4 albums, which is not Tuesday. A bad thing. Yeah, we'll do it on Tuesday. But yes, there's a lot of plans, because there's a huge audience out there that want our stuff, right from 78 to today. And I'm very, very grateful for that. And it makes our lives very fulfilled and fun.